This is Coach's Corner, where grassroots football matters. Message us at officialBOTN and get involved in the debate.
So hello, a very good evening and welcome to Coach's Corner Live. I do apologise for the slight delay tonight. 8 minutes, we're a little bit late. Pete, do you want to tell everyone why we're late, or do you want to share that with everybody?
My technical skills no abound. One of the bits of kit that we needed, I seems to have mislaid it.
So we got Pete's got some really nice kit now, which is good. You see, he's got a microphone there, and he's got some headphones and everything like that. And he lost one of the vital adapters for the headphone. In fact, you didn't lose it; you had it. And what you did was you just said, "I don't think I need this because it's going to plug into here, which it's not meant to plug into." And you put it in a box. So for the last 8 minutes, while we've been getting ready for the show, I've just watched Pete wander around his room looking for a little headphone adapter in every box and every shelf that he's got.
I don't understand how it could have just got disappeared. I have no idea. It's supposed to be here. It's not as if it's got legs. Well, I don't think it's got legs.
Anyway, I think you sound all right, so that's good. Right, Coach's Corner tonight. We want you to get involved across social media. Do let us know where you're watching and all your comments. Get them in. We'll put them on the screen. And we really want to take your questions tonight, actually. We're going to be talking a little bit about how you prepare a team at all different types of levels. And we want to get you involved with the show. We're going to be on here for half an hour. So that's the time you've got to get your questions in. Anything you want to ask Pete. Pete is the county coach developer for the FA for Surrey. Have I got your title right there? Have I done that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
So questions will be good for Pete. Less so for me, but feel free to ask them anyway if you want to. So we're going to talk about preparing a team. So let's start with preparing a team at grassroots level. So let's say you're out there from 11-a-side. So from from 12, under 12, isn't it, for 11-a-side?
Yes, under 12.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Preparing a team grassroots level. What does that look like in real terms? Wherever you're playing on a Saturday or a Sunday.
A lot of that will depend on how you, as a coach, see your team. That's number one, and what kind of things you want to get from your players. So, say for example, if you're if you really, I don't want to use the word take it seriously because that sounds a little bit disrespectful to some teams who can or can't train. But if you are able to train maybe twice a week, you might start to think about how you break up your sessions in the week. So for those younger age groups, you're now talking about maybe you might do some technical work on, maybe say you do Monday and Wednesday. So you might do some technical work on the Monday, and you might do some tactical work on the Wednesday, preparing for maybe the Saturday or the Sunday when you're going to play. So you then need to start to think about, what do the individuals in your team need? So how do you work with with say the player who's suffering from a little bit of a lack of confidence, one who's really fully confident, one who can't get to every training session, all those sort of things you have to think about at grassroots level, because I think grassroots coaches have to take on a hell of a lot when they decide to take a team on, and as those kids get older, what you then start to find is that they have other things that come into the mix. So just changing school, etc., all those sort of things that come into the mix.
It's and this I remember my time coaching an under 18s team, so we were moving up a little bit from where we started, saying under 12s and maybe things associated with school. Coaching under 18s team, I remember, Pete, you were actually, how we met, you were mentoring me on a level 2 course, and you were talking me through the different challenges that would happen at that age group, and that was less so parents maybe pressure for and dealing with that side of it, but it was the players really expected to play. And I want to differentiate between perhaps non-league football and professional football here. When you're talking at that level of an under 18s team, that those players expect to play. They don't get paid. They actually pay to play. and that sort of age, they take it very. It's almost a bit of a disrespect if they're not picked. It really doesn't reflect well on them. And I remember speaking to somebody about why they weren't in the team, and they felt that I disrespected them in front of everybody because they weren't in the team, so they were going to be thought of as rubbish and not good enough to play. And there are very different challenges to deal with, and as we sort of move up the age groups.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at a player at, say, if we go all the way back and you look at a player who may be starting to play at 5, okay, and then you then talk about the foundation phase, which goes up to sort of like 10, 12, those sort of ages. That player at 5 looks totally different to when they get to 10. You know, you're talking really now about, you know, that growth and maturation and what they expect. And when you then take that to 18, and you're right what you said about the thing about disrespect, how the player will feel disrespected. The reason why they feel disrespected, because at that age, a lot of the stuff and the way they do things is around peer group and around peer pressure. So they're more, they would rather impress their friends than impress you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because that's why when you often hear, oh, young players, they have no fear. You know, yeah, they don't. They actually don't have no fear, because it's that thing of when they see an opportunity to do something that's a bit tricky, and it comes off, they get loads and loads of props from their mates, and that's the thing that inspires them, gives them social standing within their group, and that sort of stuff. So it's really important for those for those players at those ages, especially grassroots under 18 players, that you've got to take them on a journey with you. You know, there's a squad of 16, and you're not all going to start every week, but you have to get them into a position where they realise why they may not be starting that week.
And this is all part of when we talk about preparation for games. This is all part of that preparation, and looking specifically maybe at that example where you've got a less so. And I don't want to stereotype here and say that it's all the same, but when we talked about the under 12 groups and moving through the early teenage years, parents and pressure from parents is obviously a big thing. When we get to the level of 18, we're saying that actually it's all about their appearance in front of their friends and how they're perceived by their teammates and their friends rather than the coach. And again, it differs in every situation. But if we look at an example like that preparation is really important for a coach and how you would deal with that. So we go back, we talk about whether you're picking your strongest team. And I actually remember asking you this question at the time. You know, you go with your strongest team, and if they win, do you keep that strongest team, or are you considering elements of the sort of psychological, where you're looking at peer groups, peer pressure, and the fact that you need to get people in the team to build that confidence? Because otherwise, if you leave someone out of the team for 8 weeks, even if you're winning, their confidence is shot to pieces. The way they look in front of their peers is not good. And actually, there's people in the dressing room saying, well, we're winning every game. That's because you're not playing. That's a big thing to deal with.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, if you think about it, quite often this is where sometimes as a coach, you can get it around your neck, where you decide that this is your strongest team. So you decide that. And what happens when one of your players, who's your stronger players, gets injured? And now you've got the players who've not been playing, and you put them in the side, and they're struggling because they've not had any game time. At some stage, you're going to need to rely on those players. So part of your job as a coach is to develop players who you may see as your less able players to be able so that they can play and actually challenge the players who are in the team. So if you do that, what you end up with is this ability to rotate your team and rotate your squad and it not be too weakened by whatever substitution you make, which players you use, how you use them, when you use them. The important thing is that the players need the time on the pitch to be able to become better players. They can't do that by standing on the side of the pitch. Certainly not at those developmental ages, throughout the phases.
And a lot of things are going to be linked to preparation and how you prepare teams for games. So we could be here and talking about this all evening. Do get your questions in, by the way, across social media. We really want to hear from you, especially if you are coaching and you've prepared a team at whatever age level you want to add to our conversation tonight. I'd love to hear from you. But there's so many elements to preparing a team, and if we look at the side of it of when you would play your strongest team, we've had a lot of conversations in the past, and I know that it's quite prevalent in coaching courses as well, of competing at a young age. And there are some people that say it doesn't matter about winning from the age of, let's say from 11 aside, from 12 to 18. Let's just take that age bracket for the moment. Doesn't matter about winning. It's all about developing the player. And there are other people that will say we have a little bit lost our way of football is a competitive game, and people are perhaps not learning to win at a younger age. Preparation for a coach, all of those things need to be considered. You just mentioned it there. Do I put somebody else in even though he might not be in my strongest team? I need to think about when I do need him, his development. How do you deal with that as a coach?
I think when you're talking about developing a competitive environment, and I think that's what you're talking about really is a competitive environment, is that kids don't go out to go and lose a game. So if you tell them it doesn't matter, they'll go, oh, okay, fine. You know, they may secede to that rhetoric, but the point is when they're actually out there, they do want to win. What we have to do is we have to think about, well, okay, if we are going to win, and if we say and we use that term win, what do we need to be able to win? What are the things that are have to be put in place for us to be able to be more successful than the other team, first of all? Secondly, if the result is the only thing that you focus on, what gains are you going to get from that game? Because if you lose, because the thing about it is you are going to lose. The team's going to lose at some stage, whether they're the best team in the league or not. But they're going to lose at some stage. So what happens when they do lose? Do you then say, well, okay, that was terrible, you lost, get all angry? Or do you say, right, okay, during this game, you have a number of challenges that you must fulfill. If you fulfill as many of those as you can, then you then start to think about, well, what does that look like in comparison to the result? See?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. So that is there are important things to set up and to set out before you think we're going to win this. I've just got to choose this team because we want to win this football match. And I'm going to come on to a question that David's just put in the chat at the moment. We've just put on the screen. We'll come on to that in a second, David. I just wanted to say that comparison with the Premier League and the professional game, we said we were going to look at all levels. Just moving on ever so slightly, you look at Manchester United, for example, this season in the Premier League. It's fair to say that they're under a lot of pressure, and football changes when you're in the Premier League. That the money that's involved, it perhaps changes so that there is a different look. It's not all about developing players. But I think what people do forget is a lot of it still is about developing players. And Manchester United this season would have probably played a fair few games knowing that perhaps they're not going to get the results, but they've got to stick with certain players and they've got to develop certain players to get to where they want to go. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's at any level there's an element of development. So you may look at, say, for example, a Marcus Rashford. What is Marcus Rashford? What, 20, 21, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 21.
Yeah, so he's not reached his peak. He's still developing. So it's down to the manager to ensure that he keeps teaching the player and keeps helping the player. The player stays wants to keep learning and stays inquisitive and inquiring. That's really important because that's how the player develops. If the player just thinks, oh, well, I've made it, well, the player's never going to develop. If the manager says, well, you're in the first team now, you just got to go out and play. If you can't do it, then I'm going to drop you. Well, you're not developing the player. What you're doing is you're pushing the player into an environment where they never feel that they're going to get enough of a chance to be able to show what they can do, because development happens over time. It doesn't happen just because on a given day you've been put into the first team.
So so there is in effect development across football, whether you're a grassroots coach or whether you're coaching in non-league, in the football league, in the Premier League. Developing players is a big part of it.
Yeah, good players want to develop. I remember hearing an interview with Jermaine Defoe when he went to Bournemouth, and he said he went to Bournemouth because Eddie Howe said to him that he could still coach him. And at the time, Defoe would be seen as coming towards the end of his career. I mean, he's still obviously playing up at Rangers in Scotland, but he still wanted to learn, and that's the kind of that's why he's played for so long, because he never closes his mind, and he has that growth mindset around developing. And Eddie Howe obviously has a growth mindset that he's thinking, well, I can still develop players no matter how old they are, and I can help them to become better so they can get a longer career, and or if they're young, they can come through. I can help them, etc., etc., etc. They're going through a sticky patch at the moment, but when football starts again, that is if it starts again. But the whole point is he's looking at it and he's going, I wonder if we change this all the time, that developmental mindset is still there.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. And I want to come on to David's point. He says the British DNA is already competitive, set them other tangible targets. The first thing I'm going to do, David, is actually just challenge that statement. Is it competitive? I know, Pete, that you said it is, and players will want to win. But if you go out and when we talk about setting other tangible targets, are we saying that we set targets, but we need to remind players, but we need to coach players as well that it is about winning? You said to me that players will already want to win. So does that mean that as a coach, we go out and we don't even need to talk about winning a football match? We just say, well, look, we're going to look at doing this, and this today because the winning will just come. Or do we need to mention? I'll give you an example, and maybe it's a different thing, but how you keep a lead. You know, everyone talks about the last 10 minutes of a game. The different things that you need to do because you need to see games out, and we talk about killing games off. I know they're cliched phrases, but surely that means that those things have to be in preparation. Again,
it depends on the level that you're at. I mean, David's point about the competitive nature of the British game, I would say yes. You know, all you have to do is go out on a Sunday or a Saturday morning and see parents jumping up and down every time their kids score a goal. You know, and you see the tackles that will fly in from the kids and so on and so forth. And they do that because they at the younger ages, they want to impress their parents. They want to impress the coach. At the older ages, they may want to impress their boyfriends, girlfriends, whoever it is that's watching on the side of the pitch. So he said about tangible goals. Those are really important. So imagine this. I say to my under 18 centre forward, I say, right, okay, what I want to happen today is I want you to make sure that you can receive the ball in between the two centre backs and try and get a shot off. And I want you to try and do that at least 3 times today. Okay. But you should have worked on that in training during the week. So the player sees the link between the training and the goal that's been set them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's important. Now, once you get to half time, say, for example, you can now say to the player, you've only got 1 shot off. How do you think that that you might get on the ball more? And that player, that centre forward, might say, well, actually, our midfield players are holding on to the ball too long. I want the ball played in earlier. If they can play it into me earlier, then I can get in between the two centre backs. Because as soon as I've set up, the two centre backs come in and close me down. So they might come up with that answer for you. So they're on the pitch. So they're now giving you something that you may not have seen as a coach. So this is where we talk about, you know, by giving a tangible goal, that's related to the training session that we may have done during the week or some work we've done in previous weeks. We can now set challenges that are relevant to the various players. Now, if you've seen in the practice, in your practice in the week, that your midfield players hold on to the ball too long, that may be something that you may need to go back to.
So your preparation is all, it starts, when we talk about match preparation, it starts at training the week before. It starts, as you put your training plans together, that's what you're working on. You're preparing for the match.
Well, yeah, I mean, if your teams are playing in competitive fixtures, or in fixtures where they're playing against other opposition, at the younger age groups, what you're doing is you're putting in some building blocks for them, so that the match, for me anyway, and I can only speak for myself here, the match for me is basically, is the stuff that I did in training, has that worked? Do the players understand it? Are the players able to speak to me and tell me, oh, actually, do you remember what you said, coach, about this and this? That works. Or, you know what you said about this, coach? We can't do that because they're doing this to us. And then you can start having the conversation and start to give them, and you might start asking them questions. Okay, if they're doing that, what else do you think that you might need to do to help you to get success in that situation? And see if they can come up with some answers. And if they can't, that's when you, as a coach, might now need to start to step in and go, okay, here's some things that we can do around that. Or we can't do anything about that now, but we'll work on that next week in training.
Yeah.
So it's those are the little nuggets, and what David says about tangible goals, those are some of the tangible goals that you can start to work towards.
Yeah, do get your comments into us. As I say, if you've got any questions, then please let us know across social media. We'll get them on the screen and we'll answer them. That's what we're going to do tonight. Right, I want to move on. We've talked about preparation, and we will miss things out because this is such a huge subject that we could talk all night about preparing for matches. We've talked a little bit about setting tangible goals. We've talked about how you might deal with some of the psychological issues in the dressing room and how you might have to deal with different age groups with different things. Maybe it's parents, maybe it's teammates, whatever that might be. When you look at the Premier League, you would say a part of match preparation would be tactical and looking at the opposition. And that would start, I'm imagining, more so as we look at semi-professional football, go into non-league and into the Football League. Let's, for the moment, keep with grassroots. What kind of preparation and at what age group, and should you be doing any sort of preparation towards the opposition? So let's say, for example, and I'd like to give you a little example, Pete. We're playing a team at an under-14s, and you've set goals, and you're a very organised coach, and you're doing everything that we've talked about to get your team improving, developing the player. But you're coming up against a team that every time that you play them, play a certain way, are physical, strong, get crosses into the box, and you struggle to deal with that. Would you look at grassroots level at that age, let's say under 14, under 12, under 14, would you look at the opposition and think, right, I've got to look tactically here because we want to try and win this game?
I actually have done that. So I coached a team once, and we used to play against a side that were quite physical, strong. We were very small, and we played them in a league game that would have decided whether whichever team won it would have won the league. So we started the game, and we went I think 2-0 up. And I made my normal every 15-minute substitutions. The parents and some of the players, they wanted us just to stay with the strongest team. And I said, no, the players who are subs have to play in this game. It's very, very important that they experience playing in what would be termed at that age as big games, cup games, games that we can. Anyway, we ended up losing the game 5-3. We ended up losing the game. But I'd watched what the opposition were doing. I think when they got back to 3-3, I stopped looking at us and started looking at them, because we were playing them the following week in the County Cup final. Yeah. And I watched them and I said, okay, here are some things. There were some real patterns in their play that they were using. So we just, in the week, I worked on countering those patterns. One of the things they wanted to do against us was if they got a free kick, was they would just smash the ball into the box. So what we did, we worked that following week on not giving away free kicks. That was what our practices were about. And then what we then worked on was a series of, if you like, plays that every time they got a free kick, we would do something that made them have to think again. Yeah. So we would do things like we'd have a call, and as they were running up to the ball, we'd all run out and leave them offside, and things like that. And then we'd have another call, which as they took the free kick, we just all drop back. So eventually what they did, they didn't know what to do with their free kicks. So they'd do a dummy run, they would do this, and then they'd start knocking in bad free kicks and so on and so forth. And we ended up winning the game 4-1. That was a week later.
It's funny. It's funny. I'm just going to say, you mentioned running out and everybody runs out. There was a stage where that was very, very popular, wasn't there? Where everyone would run out. And I remember I was a season ticket holder at Reading, actually, and I remember Reading doing it a lot. And there were a couple of times where every single Reading player ran out, and they had about 7 players on side just to tap the ball home. So if you don't get that one right, you don't see it as much now, but there was a stage where a lot of teams did that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is down to the fact why that doesn't happen now, because teams play a lot more quickly, so they'll spot the ball down, and players are so clever, especially at the higher levels. Players are so clever; they'll hear the call. I remember many years ago, back in the dark ages, when I was playing, and we played in a local charity game, and we played Chelsea's reserves, and we had a similar thing, a call that we would catch teams offside. And that's where I got the idea from with my younger team, and so we had this call, and we did the call. We caught them offside. It was in the first minute of the game, and all the Chelsea players went, "The call is this. It's that." We went, "Oh." We did, and they sussed it straight away. And we all looked at each other and we went, "We can't do that again."
Yeah.
and that, when the players get to that level, that those higher levels, they know that they look out for it. That's part of their preparation. What are the calls that they make? What are the signals? What do the signals mean? What happens? And the players, they work it out like that. That's why professionals are professionals, because they see things really, really quickly.
Yeah, we talked about that on the show last week, actually, when we were doing looking at midfield and how you and you work the midfielders and actually the defensive midfielders. We were saying that there were certain things get picked up, obviously, when they're professional and they're playing at such a high level. It's so quick, and players will pick it up a lot quicker. We've almost run out of time tonight already. Can you believe it? We've been talking for almost half an hour. And we're going to put cap on it tonight, because a lot of people talk about length of shows. Sometimes we'll carry on, and tonight we're going to do half an hour. I just want to say, we're doing this every Wednesday. We do want to get your questions in. If you're watching this back, leave a comment on social media and let us know what you would like us to talk about. This is a new show. It's all about coaching, Coach's Corner. It's for you if you're coaching or if you're thinking about getting into coaching. And we want to know what subjects you would like us to talk about. On future weeks, we'll be joined by managers across the non-league game, across the grassroots game, people that coaches like Peter. And we want to get your thoughts onto the show as much as possible. So do let us know if there's something you're really struggling with and you want us to talk about. And the other thing just worth mentioning is this show is for everyone. So if you're a coach at UEFA B level and you want to talk about some ideas, we'll do that. If you're somebody sitting at home, like I was 8 years ago, thinking I'd love to get into coaching and I want to do something about it, we'll have shows where we'll let you know how you can get into coaching and what you have to do. So much more planned. One more question before we go. Darren said, why is it that some of the better players in the squad are the most difficult to train and very indisciplined? I coach under 15 boys. We're going to stay on just to get Pete's answer to that for Darren.
That's often because the better players are allowed to get away with stuff quite often. So they may have got away with it all the way through their careers, where they do train or they don't train, and the coach puts up with it. And I think a lot of that is down to when we start the season, what rules do we put in place for our team? Let's say, for example, as a coach, I would have a set of expectations that I would want from the players. Then I want the players to have a set of expectations that they would expect from me, and also from each other. So those meetings that we have with our players at the start of the season, they're really important. And the question that I would say to you, Darren, if the best players are ill-disciplined, are they really the best players?
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Obviously, I'm assuming he means technically the best players. But interesting, under 15s, attitude is a big part of it. You know, the psychological side of the game. We talk often about four corners, and you got to look at all the areas. And that's a very good point. And actually, if your attitude isn't right at that age, what are you going to waste the technical ability that you have? And that's again another role for a coach. It's a whole nother show, isn't it, Pete, to talk about that?
Well, that's right. I mean, I was talking to somebody. I'm not going to say their name, but they were talking about Ravel Morrison, and they were saying that Ravel Morrison was the best player they've ever seen.
Yeah.
Now that's a big statement to make about a player like Ravel Morrison. And I've heard lots of players in the game talk about how good he is or was. I'm not sure if he's still playing, but you then have to think about, well, why doesn't somebody like that make it? Well, a lot of that is, it's when you look at the four corners, well, which corner do we need to work on with Ravel Morrison? Well, it's certainly not the technical, and it's probably not the physical, but it's those other two corners, the psychological and the social. Those are the ones that we need. And that's why they're so important now. And that's why so many clubs spend a lot of time and money having people who can help in those areas. But some players just you can't help them at times.
That's a really interesting question, and we'll definitely talk about that on a future show. How do you get the best out of players that are technically really gifted, but perhaps don't have the right attitude? Mike's just got in touch and said Morrison now at Sheffield United, but he doesn't get games. And I think he's had a lot of clubs in and around the Championship and the Premier League, and he's just somebody who goes from club to club, and there obviously is a problem there. Look, we'll talk about this on a future show. Thank you so much for your comments and getting involved in the show tonight. As I said, this is a new show, Coach's Corner. We've only been doing it a few weeks. We're going to keep doing it every Wednesday with different topics. We didn't get the tactical pad out tonight. We'll have to do that next week, Pete.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And we will have a guest joining us next week as well. Pete, as always, thank you. We got there in the end with your equipment, which was good. And we'll be back next week, next Wednesday from 8 o'clock. Don't forget, we do have a show this Friday as well. We're here Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And Charlotte will be back on Friday night with the Back of the Net Extra Time show. Plenty to discuss and some real good guests on the show as well. Until then, have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you on Friday. Good night.
Take care.